It's on New Chardon Street. If you'd like to go there for jail solidarity, please do. The blue line goes to Bowdoin. The orange and green line will go to Haymarket and drop you very close to New Chardon Street. With me right now is Terra Nova, and she was originally going to be the guest to speak about the legal injunction filed by the National Lawyers Guild, weren't you?
Yeah. Yes, I was. You had asked me to speak about the court process and what to expect, and now it's over. So there have been talk about an appeal, and if you'd like, I'll talk about that now or
Yes.
later. There are differing opinions relative to whether an appeal is worthwhile, given that we have already gotten a win in the sense that the action, the camping action, staying overnight, creating an agrarian community as an example or exemplar society is already deemed as free speech. So if we counter that, then we open that back up. So that ruling is really important as it stands. And if we were still in the camp, then it might be worth doing the appeal to protect the ability to stay in the camp. Whereas the ability to get amends for something that we've already lost is very difficult. So, and maybe impossible. So what are we going to do? Sue for cash?
Right.
That kind of thing. So it's not clear whether we're going to do that now.
Well, one of the things I wanted to ask you, the initial restraining order that was filed exclusively against the Boston police.
Well, the second party was the Greenway. It was against the city, but the Greenway was a co-defendant.
Now, do private security agencies or maybe the transit police or other law enforcement bureaus supersede this restraining order in the event that we were to regain a physical occupation?
Well, the property itself is owned by the state.
Okay.
But it's legally, the enforcement is the Boston City. So the Boston Police Department are required to enforce the obligations under the lease. And so that's for the Greenway as well. So although the Greenway is the leaseholder, the enforcement responsibility is the Boston Police Department.
Now, when we attempted to expand on October 15th, I noticed that there were some transit police officers there.
Well, the expansion wasn't approved by General Assembly, so that I just want to make sure that that is clear. That again, the property over the transitway is owned by the state. It's owned by the Metropolitan Transit Authority, I believe, MTA. Okay. And so the police, for the owner, in a sense, has to be present when the police that are the enforcers have to do their quote-unquote jobs. So it makes sense to me that the transit police are there, whether or not the transit police have, in a sense, the ethical authority to be enforcing public use of a public space that has been, in effect, sold to a private agency so that then the people cannot have access to it. To me, that's a whole other conversation.
I see. Now, as far as what do we do from here? I mean, are there any counter lawsuits that are being filed by people that were arrested? Was anybody brutalized to the point of being physically harmed? I mean, I saw in some of those pictures, and I was there myself. You know, they kept us pretty long and non-visible distance from the actual raid and the cutting of the tents. So, are there any counter lawsuits at the point?
Well, in my opinion, this is my personal opinion, and I'm not a lawyer, so all I can tell you is that I feel as though my rights were abused in that situation. I had a camera myself. I was with the press, and we were physically moved, pushed away from the arrest location. So I believe that we do have some recourse there. It's whether or not we can muster the forces, in a sense, to take action, because we already have action going on with the sink. There's other action being taken, and we only have so many, in a sense, staff resources because we're all volunteer or we rely on grants. And so we have to place those resources carefully, and we have to defend the folks that are personally being dragged through the courts. So we've got to, I believe that's our first responsibility as a movement, is to take care of the people that, I mean, we have the larger responsibility to the rights of us as a whole, but the individuals right now are at risk. And that's actually a technique, that if you keep individuals busy in the court system, then they can't go around protesting their rights. And so it's rather clever, actually, to, I believe, to find ways to charge people. And so, I mean, that's a technique that people think they're doing the job, and so that's what they're up to.
Well, I'm really glad to have you on the show, and I'm really glad to have our other three guests. We have Pan Angelopoulos from the Socialist Caucus. One of the ways that we organize ourselves is through working groups and caucuses. There is a logistics caucus, which during the 100-day occupation was responsible for handing out goods and services. There was a facilitators working group which handled the General Assembly. The General Assembly is, of course, the way the Occupy movement organizes itself and passes proposals and proposes proposals. We have somebody from Occupy Radio Boston. A lot of the occupations have started radio stations. We have started our own radio station, and we are going to tell you in these next 2 hours how you can get in touch and how you can listen and even get involved with Occupy Boston Radio. Coming up next, we have Bill Lewis. If you'd like to make your way on stage, Mr. Lewis. We're eventually going to wrap this up with a panel discussion.
Hey, Zoe, how's it going?
Well, these are really unfortunate circumstances that we're here, but at least we're able to still have these GAs. Do you mind telling everyone, the people of Cambridge, where we have them?
Well, not at all. I actually would disagree. These are glorious circumstances because we have changed the discourse of American politics. People are talking about the issues, and that's what we're really here for. I mean, we've struggled with all these issues of the camp and of course, the eviction and everything, but fundamentally, we're here to talk about what's wrong with America and what we have to do to fix it. And that's what people are talking about, so we are successful.
Yeah.
So, you were asking?
I want tell the people of Cambridge when our General Assemblies meet.
So, our General Assemblies meet 4 times a week. We are currently meeting tonight at 6 o'clock at St. Paul's Cathedral, which is right opposite Park Street Station. We are figuring out where we will be meeting the other days, which would be Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday, because our last couple of times out at the bandstand got chilly. And so we are running around like chicken with our heads cut off trying to find indoor spaces. So at least tonight we know St. Paul's, 6 o'clock.
Now, what are some of the proposals that have been worked on in the past? Some of the critiques of the General Assembly format is that some of the proposals that have come forth have been kind of petty or have been kind of missing the point. I mean, we started with corporate personhood and trying to pass a proposal that would specifically state that we support a constitutional amendment that states that a person is defined constitutionally as a human being and only a human being. And at the end, we ended up with
all sorts of things.
The signs will be read at this particular protest, and allocating $40 for socks.
So, because of the horizontal nature of our meetings, it allows people to basically to do anything they want to. And as a whole group, we have such disparate ideas and ideas of what's important. And it is very often that someone will think, oh, this is such a simple proposal, boom, we'll just get it in there and everybody will agree. My friend wanted to have a proposal that the color of the movement be blue. And I told him, don't do that, people will argue it to death, you won't be happy. If you want the color to be blue, just go out and make blue buttons and have blue. And so I went out and made blue buttons.
They're very aesthetically pleasing, I have to say. I really like these are the signature buttons of Occupy Boston, and you know it's very minimalistic, but they're cute. I love them. I absolutely adore them.
So, what do we call it? Autonomous action.
Yes.
Just go out and do it.
Describe the consensus process.
So the consensus process is the objective, of course, is to get everybody's voices heard and to work a proposal from one person's idea to a group's consensus, that it becomes our proposal and we all agree on it. And the whole point of the process is to get through everybody to understand it. So we have clarifying questions and points of information so that people can understand the nuances of a proposal. And then we give everyone the opportunity to say their concerns. I'm concerned that the proposal is going to cost too much money that we need for something else. I'm concerned that this proposal will weaken our organization by confusing colors with movements or anything. So we get the concerns out, and then we ask for people who really like it support. And finally, we try to come up with amendments to address those concerns. So what if we changed the proposal so that we didn't have a specific color, but we had a general pattern for the color? Would everybody agree with that? And so we move our way through these amendments, some of which I find incredibly trivial, and I just like, God, why do we have to choose the color of the tent? It's a tent. Just trust the people to get a tent.
Paint the tent.
Or paint it. Just don't bother me with talking about and so that happens.
Yeah.
And I think as we get more experience in the process, that it will actually get better at this and will lower the number of what I consider trivial things. We'll be able to focus on the big ideas. But it's so horizontal and it's so unknown, and we're struggling with it. And we get, you've seen them. We're in the middle of a proposal and we will get an individual who might be intoxicated or just angry and has to have the microphone now.
No GA.
And so it's a struggle.
Yeah. One thing that I'm going to ask you that I'm eventually going to ask everybody, do you think the fact that we had a camp and we had our own enclosed and encapsulated community forced us to constantly use the General Assembly as a format for dealing with our own problems as opposed to the problems of the rest of society?
I think the answer to that question is absolutely. We had those several instances of people who shouldn't be there. They were taking advantage of our camping facilities and food, and were having much too much fun doing drugs and getting into fights, and they weren't involved in the movement.
Yeah.
And so we struggled with those so hard.
Yeah.
And we had several improper evictions. But they were so extreme. And then, of course, we had the whole thing with Phil, where he was, he came after me, he punched out somebody else, he was very degrading to a number of the women. And we had that huge discussion, and it was horrible, and yet it forced us to deal with the realities of human beings, and we can be SOBs.
Yeah.
And Phil was actually useful in some sense. I have this picture of me and Phil in the good old days, and we're like this, me and Phil.
Yeah.
and now,
Me and Bill. Bill
he
and Phil.
comes and screams at me.
Yeah, he,
So I just let him.
Yeah. I mean, different people had different ways of communicating themselves at the Occupy movement. Do you think that given time that people, given checkered pasts and given their relative lack or, maybe too much solidarity or too much involvement with politics, that some people were doing so much of the work and losing sleep and not getting proper food, that it was eroding their ability to kind of bring some of the people who had maybe not yet evolved a political conscience?
Oh, absolutely. In other words,
point,
we know exactly the people we're talking about. I mean, I worked closely with Alex and with Anna, and those two in particular were so overwhelmed and involved, and they did such incredible good things. They were they were the two people that I think of who just was so admired throughout the camp. And then a dozen other people that I worked closely with that I am not worthy. I am not worthy.
I mean, it was certainly an interest. It was the longest occupation that we ever had.
It is.
You know, it was 100 days, and do you think that if we had kept that critical mass, that we would have been able to keep it for longer?
Of course, but it doesn't matter. We've changed the conversation now, and our real work devolves now into working groups where, you know, last night I was with the outreach group, and we're working on a big campaign with City Life and some of the other groups down there to talk about foreclosure issues. And so I think that's where we are for the moment. And,
Right.
you know, if we end up with a physical encampment ever again, I don't know. But the important thing is we made people talk and think, and they're doing it, and we're continuing on our various and sundry activities.
Well, Bill, it was a pleasure to have you. One of the things, obviously, the Occupy movement is attacking the banks and corporations at their source, attacking the money supply and those that own the means of productions, the supposed 1% juxtaposed against the 99%. There are a number of ways of communicating these ideas and a number of mediums, and one of those mediums is, of course, internet radio. And coming up next, we have Brandon Jardine, who is one of the principal workers, one of many people who contribute to Occupy Boston Radio. Brandon, make your way here. We are live.
Hi, how's it going?
Brandon, pleasure to have you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be here.
Now, essentially, how can people get on, how can people listen to Occupy Boston Radio?
Yeah, so the easiest way to listen to Occupy Boston, well, right now the only way to listen to Occupy Boston Radio is via the internet. And it's pretty simple. You go to occupyboston.org/radio, and there'll be you'll see a big link that says click here to open the radio player, and you just click on that link, and a pop-up window comes up, and you just, Occupy Boston Radio will start coming out of your speakers. So it's pretty easy to listen to radio.
And what kind of programming do you offer so far?
So we've only been broadcasting for this will be the third day that we've been broadcasting, and so far we've had sort of ad hoc talk programs. I mean, really the idea we had in creating Occupy Boston Radio was to have an open mic where anybody involved with the Occupy movement or whoever wanted to come onto the radio and speak and have a show could do that. So the past few days have been, we've been set up and we've been inviting occupiers just to come on the radio and talk about the occupation. So that's the kind of thing that we've had in the last few days.
Okay. Noam Chomsky,
Right.
his lecture is one of the examples of programming. About 1,500 people showed up to see him speak. It was followed by a number of demonstrations that occurred after that. What types of issues can people expect to hear being addressed on Occupy Boston Radio?
I think any issue that can even tangentially be related to the Occupy movement, you can expect to hear on Occupy Boston Radio. I mean, so we've had shows about race. We've had shows about technology. We spent almost an hour the other morning talking about free and open source technology and free and open source software. So even things that you might not initially pin down to the Occupy movement, you will hear on Occupy Boston Radio.
Okay.
And Chomsky and all the other talks we've had at camp, we have audio recordings of all those, and eventually you can expect to hear those up on Occupy Boston Radio as well.
Now, what about music? What is Occupy Boston doing to pursue that?
So music is sort of a tricky thing to get because music is most popular music anyway is copyrighted. So it's not as simple as we can just load up a playlist of popular songs and broadcast them on Occupy Boston Radio, because we could get sued for a great deal of money for doing that.
What entities sue? Record companies? Are we talking about special interest groups like What organizations would you expect to deal with lawsuits from if they came
Right.
from them?
Well, for music, I would expect a lawsuit from one particular organization, and that's the RIAA, which is the Recording Industry Association of America, or something like that. And they are rather notorious for handing out large lawsuits for people who are sharing music without owning the copyrights. I
Right.
mean, there's been a couple of cases in the news where people have gotten $100,000 fines because they were
Really,
sued.
$100,000.
Oh, more than that, like millions of dollars, because they were sued for downloading 12 tracks on their computer. So that's the kind of thing, that's the kind of problem we're dealing with when we're thinking
Seems
about.
a little bit exorbitant.
Well, yeah, it is. It most certainly
Mm.
is. So,
Is there any is there any or organization within the communications or maybe a media working group or something to that effect to counter some of the efforts by the Recording Industry Association of America?
well, I'm
I-
not sure what you mean by counter. Like,
Well, one of the basis that's being used was a piece of legislation passed in 1998 called the Digital Millennium
Right.
Copyright Act, which basically said that if you're going to play this song, you have to pay the record company that owns the song a certain amount of money. Obviously, we don't know how much the musicians themselves get of it as a proportion of what you're paying for the song, but it's something to the effect of like 94 cents a song or 108 or $1.08 a song. So obviously the charges mount, but is there any effort to sort of undermine what they're doing so that people can have access to music and so people can make lively radio?
I'm not aware that the media working group or any other working group is actively campaigning against the DMCA right now. I'm part of the tech working group, and I think that's something that I would be very interested in seeing the tech working group do.
Great.
Yeah, so we're getting some happy fingers from the studio.
I mean, I
Right.
like good music too, and
Yeah.
the music. A lot of would you say that commercial radio has become too lowest common denominator?
Yeah, I mean, my personal view, I think I would agree with that.
Mm.
But the thing is, there's a lot of good music that's not held by the big record companies
not
under
copyrighted.
those strict licenses. So there's
Right.
something called Creative Commons, which is a set of licenses which artists can apply to their work, and it basically, if there are songs out there, and there are, licensed under the Creative Commons license, we would be free to broadcast those on the radio. So there are some songs out there we can broadcast on the radio, and there's a lot of good music out there that's licensed under these open licenses.
As far as local bands are concerned,
Mhm.
maybe unsigned talent, are there any efforts to procure some of the some of their work and maybe put it up to promote some of the?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something we will look into. I mean, there are a lot of legal problems with having live music on your show, and right now at this point in time, we just cobbled together the station in a few days. So right now at this point in time, I don't think we are immediately looking for artists to come onto the show, but a few weeks down the line, we very well might.
Now, is the radio station itself looking to pursue a permanent space, or from what I've been told by my sources that you're essentially that you're a web station,
Right.
and that you're portable in so many words.
I actually brought our studio with me.
Oh, awesome!
If you want me to show it here. So, right now, our equipment is we're high tech and lo-fi, is what we've been saying. So, the bulk of our studio is taken up by this computer
Ah.
here. And it's basically just a Dell that the Occupy movements, Occupy Boston's tech group has had around for a while that we've been using for various things. And now it's sort of the radio studio. So basically, whenever you listen to the radio, most of what we're streaming comes from the computer. We have this microphone and a pair of headphones, and that is the current state of the Occupy Boston radio studio.
That's Occupy Boston Radio so far.
Right, and I mean we're looking for upgrades. So if anyone wants to donate some
do you
equipment.
have a wish list? What types of things, if people want to donate, what types of things would you like to see donated that you think would improve the ability or enhance the content of the station
Right.
itself?
So I mean we've got you've seen what we've got so far. So almost anything is an upgrade.
What specifically, though?
Right. So really, what we need some mixers. Well, we need one. More would be good, and we need some nice microphones. So that's kind of top priority right now.
Okay. Brandon.
Thank you very much.
For coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Technology. It's at the heart of the movement, and it's at the basis of a lot of things, including something that is basically the grounds for the basis of our entire society, which is, of course, the domestication of agriculture. Agribusiness has taken over agriculture, let's be real. And here to talk about that is somebody from something that was just started up called Occupy the Farm. Make your way on stage. Have a standing ovation. We have so many people here. What's the state of agriculture?
The state of agriculture. Like pretty much everything else in this global capitalist economy, is not a state of agriculture, but a corporation of agriculture. And I mean, the vast majority of the food that we receive at this point in time is driven by large agribusiness and is, in some sense, genetically modified.
What are some of the most heinous violations that you feel corporations have made as far as food production, or as far as the cultivation?
Well, I mean, there's one major thing. I mean, you started this segment off with talking about technology, and I think that technology itself has been utilized. I mean, some people think that tech is just a service thing. However, technology is fundamentally political. So just like our radio station is running off of free and open source software, that software itself is a political act. So by us running radio off of free and open source software, we actually are contradicting those sort of copyright laws you were talking about. In agriculture, in food, the same process is happening, except there is no free and open source software. So Monsanto, for example, the major violator, the worst violator, transforms our material genetic reality. And then they say that transformation, that material life, that biology is now ours. We own it as a patent. So they patent food, and then they utilize their patents to exercise power over farmers. So at this point in time, if you're a commercial farmer, it's impossible for you not to utilize Monsanto products, Monsanto's seed. And when you utilize Monsanto seed, you cannot save your seed for next year. You, in some cases, cannot actually reproduce your crops because they won't reproduce. So Monsanto actually fundamentally is changing our biology, and in so doing, they're violating some of the fundamental principles of any notion of ecological diversity, and in so doing, they're harming both our economy, because small farmers can't make a living, like literally can't make a living, can't make ends meet. So almost every single small farmer has a job outside their farm. And if anybody who's done farming knows that farming is a full-time job. So it requires 2 jobs to just maintain a farm. So I think, at the macro level, Monsanto's patenting of life is the worst offense we have facing us. So, one of the projects of Occupy the Farm, one of my pet projects, is to begin thinking about and creating an alternative license, a copyleft, if you will, for seed, or the people's patent is another example. These practices are happening in other regions too. So the people's sorry, am I talking too much?
Oh no.
So
let me get this straight. So Monsanto produces seeds. They've patented seeds that only yield 1 year's worth of crops, and then you have to repurchase the seeds.
Correct. Not only that, but they also create organisms that, for example, their new leaf potato, you can read about this in Michael Pollan's book, The Botany of Desire. The new leaf potato isn't even classified as a vegetable or even an edible plant. It's classified as a pesticide. So it's only regulated by the EPA. So the agriculture industry can't even regulate food because it's no longer considered food. It's actually a pesticide, and then we eat it. Right? So, I think that particular product has been modified or changed or no longer sold, but there are other products in the same vein that have the same properties, right, where they are pesticides and we eat them, and we don't know that we eat them. So Monsanto doesn't even have to advertise or let us know that we're eating things that are, every cell of their being are pesticides.
Was there an instance where a substance was injected into the teats of cows that were producing milk in order to get them to produce more milk, and that milk was subsequently making people resistant to bacteria, or rather antibiotics?
I believe that is a definitive case. I'm not 100% sure. The irony is, like many things in the Occupy movement, we have many hats. So Brandon could be up here with Occupy the Farm, just as I could have been up here with Brandon and the radio station and tech. So we're all doing lots of things. So I'm actually not a farm guy. We have farmers who could probably speak to this more definitively, and we have other people who couldn't be here today that would have more information about it. But Occupy the Farm is really trying to make the linkages between these different kinds of hats that we wear, between being urban people and rural people, and the ways in which we're all in the same system together. And we need to sort of fundamentally make these connections, because if we don't, we will not be able to have a sustainable crop. Because the second part of I'm being given directions, but I don't know what they are. Move in this way.
There we go.
Oh, okay. So we won't actually be able to have a sustainable food system if we don't begin changing our practices, because the food system itself is becoming so singular and so non-diverse that we're literally losing plants by the year. Like every season we lose another set of plants. And knowing this, and knowing that I don't know that much, but there are a lot of farmers out there that know a lot, we want to make those connections. So we actually want to learn from the people who are actually doing the farming.
Okay. Now, what is Occupy the Farm doing to have they procured land to maybe cultivate crops at this point?
Okay. Well, we have not procured land. We've talked about procuring land, but right now we're not focused on actually making new farms. We emerged basically with the notion that, hey, there are all these foreclosed homes, right? And people in urban environments that are suffering the loss of their livelihood, their place to live, their fundamental reality. And this is also happening in rural areas, right? Small farmers are losing their farms all the time, or being foreclosed on. So those same processes are happening. So we really wanted to focus on helping small farmers in some fundamental way. If that means doing an action around them, occupying their bank, their local bank that's foreclosing on them, whatever the case, we want to have actions to help small farmers. So that's how we emerged. We didn't emerge as a project to actually create new types of agriculture, because there are people already doing that, but we want to connect those people to the people who might want to do that but don't know how, or the people who want to transform the way they're doing agriculture but don't have the means to do so. So we want to make the kinds of connections that will allow people to do different kinds of farming.
Okay. One other thing I wanted to ask you, how is this working? The Occupy movement is a global movement, and it's multinational. Now, we have over 3,000 global occupations in about 90 or so countries, 90 plus countries. Now, the corporations themselves supersede national law in most of them. They supersede regulation, so they're able to apply their business practices and the mechanisms that they choose to, hence the reason why they relocate or divest funds. As far as agriculture is concerned, what can be said about how companies like Monsanto or Procter & Gamble go to countries like, say, Honduras or Nicaragua and exploit farmers there?
Oh yeah, I mean it's a whole. I mean, like, it is a global process, right? I mean, when we talk about agriculture, we're talking about a global process, because U.S. farmers get the message that you're supposed to feed the world, and then at the same time, you have these large agribusinesses like Monsanto that are going to, other parts of the world, like Brazil, for example, and creating farms that require them to, just clear-cut rainforest just to have crops, right? Or maybe even just to grow cattle, right? I mean, there are so many ways that the farming system is designed to be mass-produced, and this mass production actually always causes environmental hazards and debilitates our system fundamentally. So, I mean, yeah, it is a global process, and I don't want to sort of localize it to the U.S. as a problem, but Occupy the Farm is trying to deal locally and connect the parts of the Occupy movement that maybe don't even realize they're parts of the Occupy movement, right? Or we don't realize. I mean, one of the sort of barriers for activists historically around this question is that activists, generally urban activists, don't recognize the rural communities as part of their mission, because it's not present and it doesn't seem as imminent, because there's not as much sort of critical mass. But there are activists in rural communities. I mean, Iowa CCI is an amazing organization that does great work. 11 of them were arrested at Occupy Iowa, or was it Occupy Des Moines? 11 of them were arrested in the Occupy movement. So I mean, they are like right there with us, and they know that our politics are connected. And so we want to expand that message and spread that message so we can all work together to transform this system. So occupythefarm.net is our web address.
Could I have your first and last name?
Stretch. More time? Okay, no problem. I can keep talking. So, I mean, I don't want to sort of, limit this discussion or my, explanation of our project just to making these urban-rural connections to farm owners and, urban suburbanites or whatever, because there are other things too, right? I mean, one of the major problems right now is immigrant labor, right? And that has a huge impact on farming right now, especially in Georgia and Alabama. Alabama has passed a law, similar to Arizona's law, and the results of that have been that Mexicans, generally Mexicans, but Latinos, the Latino community broadly, has just left Alabama. They said, okay, we're done. We can't be here because, if we're here, we're not going to be here anyway. So we're taking off. And they took off, and the farmers are like, oh my God, I don't have anybody to, pick my crops. Literally, it has killed numerous crops, at least one season of crops, because there's nobody to work the fields. And the people that come in to work the fields last for a week, and they're like, oh, I can't do this labor. I just can't do it. My body doesn't work this way. The heat's terrible. It's killing me. And so one of the interesting things about this for me is that it really sort of flips the notion of what skilled labor is, right? I mean, we don't usually recognize that there's skill in farming, right? We don't see that as skilled labor, but you know, this particular
It's
incident,
endurance.
yeah, it's endurance. It's knowing how to actually pick the crops, right? I mean, there are techniques for being able to last that long, and also how to actually do it. And people just, if you don't have those skills, you can't do it, and you may not be able to do it just physically, right? So there are some very real ways in which this are ostensibly racist policies around immigration are impacting small farmers, right? So even our racist policies of immigration are having the same effect as these like corporate dominant schemas, where it's actually just making it worse for both the people who are, you know, feeling the racism, or who we're being racist against, and it's impacting the people, the poorest people, trying to actually grow crops, right? So it's like having a double impact on the 99%, right? And so I mean, it's a you know, that's something that we really do want to recognize, is that, you know, one prong of Occupy the Farm is about labor and farm workers, not just about farm owners.
One thing that I did want to talk to you about was about how companies are buying up crops that are produced by people, farmers in other nation states, the so-called developing countries, and they're buying them at discounts, to the point where you know, people who are selling them are pleased at first, but it subsequently gets to the point where they become dependent on the sale, and are eventually coerced into selling the farm. In many countries, they have loads of small farms that are being consolidated into these large corporate farms. So it's not just rainforest and biodiversity being shredded in places like Brazil that are being cleared so that the obviously the land is arable, assuming it is, that it's actually being done to people too.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think it's just an extension of the same practices. I mean, I would say that the exact same thing, literally the exact same thing, has happened in the U.S., right? Where you get farmers who, I mean, in some cases, you know, Monsanto, specifically Monsanto, you know, they have like 300 outstanding lawsuits against farmers for growing their crops, their patented crops, right? Well, one of the impacts of this, I mean, there are a couple of things actually that are similar to this in the U.S., and I don't know that much about global farming, but in the U.S., right? I mean, the similar practices are, one, factory farms, right? So you have CAFOs come in, confined animal feeding operations. And one of the things that Iowa CCI is working on is that there's no regulation of creating CAFO in Iowa. So, or I shouldn't say there's no regulation. It's not considered building. It's considered agriculture. So even though they're building these huge buildings to contain animals, and they're producing tons of waste, they're not regulated by the building commission. They're regulated by agriculture, and there's, you know, basically no regulations if you have enough money. So these CAFOs come in, and if you actually live near them, you can't stand to live there. So it actually literally forces you to sell your land, and lots of this land is farmland, right? So you're forced just by the environmental devastation to sell this land, and you're selling it, of course, to the same corporation that just put up the factory farm next to you, and so they just consolidate land in that way, right? I mean, that's one practice that happens. Another is these outstanding lawsuits with Monsanto, where they sue the farmers, and the farmers can't, you know, pay this lawsuit, so they're given this choice of either, I mean, they're gonna have to pay money, right? They're not gonna get out of the money because they can't afford the lawyer to avoid paying the money. It's very similar to the RIAA suits, right? Where somebody, you know, was sued for building software that allowed people to share, got sued for $12 million, a college kid. And what's he supposed to do? Like, he can't do anything, so he just like makes a deal, and, you know, I think that deal was like $12,000 he ended up paying out of the $12 million that he was sued for or whatever. And the same practice is happening with farmers. You know, they get sued for $1 million for violating patent law, And what are they supposed to do? Well, they make a deal with Monsanto, and sometimes those deals end up mean they lose their land, right? I mean, so there's so many processes in place that allow large corporations to consolidate their wealth.
I mean, is there a way to get regulations put? I mean, just as sort of like an introductory effort to make it so that, you know, they can't produce so much waste that it makes it so that people can't live next door,
Well, I mean,
you know, or, you know,
the reality is for CAFO specifically, Iowa CCI is trying to get them to have to fall under the building commission, so they don't. I mean, that's actually probably not the correct term for that particular association, but that's
what are
one
these
way.
acronyms? You mentioned CAFO and IOCCI. For the viewers, could you just state what those are?
I would love to. CAFO is a confined animal feeding operation, so
Okay.
it's basically the large ways, or the large factory farms where, you know, I mean, when we're talking about pork, we're talking about pigs who literally can't move their entire life cycle. They live in pens that disallow them any mobility. Most of the time they lay around and, you know, they defecate on themselves. They live in their own defecation. It's the most horrifying thing you can imagine in terms, and then the waste just like spills out into the water, and it's like created new kinds of organisms in some cases, that new kinds of bacteria that are killing fish in the ocean, right? So those that are close to the ocean, you know, and it's a very horrifying practice. So that's confined animal feeding operation. You know, it'll be the same with chickens and cows, cattle as well. But the practices are slightly different. And then Iowa CCI is, I'm not going to bring the acronym up as it's going to slip my mind.
What do they do?
They're a farm advocacy group.
Okay.
That's their mission. They're a farm advocacy group. Every year in January, they do a State of the People's March, which is their response to the State of the Union, their State of the Union. And they march onto state capitol and sort of express the parameters of farming. And so for them, the people are farming. And so I think that's really important to think about as well, because, you know, that is the people, right? And those are the people, and we are the people, right? And so those connections really, really need to be made. And I think, you know, for most activist farmers, and I think this is true, you know, across the socioeconomic status, or, you know, strata, most activist farmers see the way we get out of this and that there is a way out, but what we have to do is begin literally buying locally, growing locally, and growing seed that's not genetically modified. If we do those three things, then we can begin to transform this system. I mean, we can't all use solely local food, because, you know, there are climates that really aren't built for that, and our Socius isn't built for that exactly.
Right.
But I mean, to the degree that we can, there's a lot we can do. So a lot of the permaculture people are really doing a lot of work on how do we take a city and turn the city into a place where we can grow stuff, right? I mean, I think they've analyzed like 21,000 acres on NYU's campus.
Wow.
That could be turned into rooftop farming. 21,000 acres, that's a lot of food. It's not enough to feed the city, but that's a lot of food, right? So, I mean, there are ways and there are practices we can engage in that will help transform that. And also, you know, the Public Patent Foundation is another example of how people are trying to regulate this. So the Public Patent Foundation actually is currently suing Monsanto, and they have, I think, over 100,000 people represented in this lawsuit, including like major seed sellers who are claiming that they're losing business, which they are, because they can't sell seed as not genetically modified, because all the seed is being cross-pollinated, and it's becoming harder and harder for them to actually sell seed, so it's killing their business. So they're actually suing based on these patents that Monsanto has acquired, and it looks like that suit has a has a chance of winning. So there's another example of how we, sort of are moving forward and may in fact find ways to usurp this process and undercut it in some fundamental ways.
Now, are there seed activists? Are there ways that people can obtain seeds that will yield a crop every single year?
I mean, there are. There's still legacy, not legacy. What's the word I'm looking for? Not heritage. Heirloom. There are heirloom seeds, and there's still quite a few of them. I mean, we're not completely wrought with genetically modified seed. In fact, I was in Occupy Wall Street had a food justice march 2 weeks ago, and at the end of the food justice march, we had a seed swap. And so everybody sat around and trading seeds, oh, this is a seed. And I mean, interestingly enough, I was with Occupy the Farm. I stopped by. I had been in Atlanta for the holidays or for Thanksgiving, and or I guess it's not. It's the Indigenous Peoples Day. Right. So I was in Atlanta for Indigenous Peoples Day, and on my way up to New York, I stopped by this small farm in Asheville, and it was, I'd never met them. They just contacted us from the website and said, hey, we'd love to help. Can you contact us or let us know? I was like, well, I'm coming up. I'll just stop by. And so I stopped by, and I was hanging out at their farm, and I spent 4 hours there. There were amazing people and doing really great farming, still struggling to make a living at it. But, the farm was amazing. And then we started talking about the march that I was going to, which was the food justice march, and Beth Trigg was like, "Oh my gosh, there's gonna be a seed swap." And so then she just went out and started grabbing seed, and it's like, "Oh, you've got to bring these seeds to the seed swap." And I'm like, "Oh wow, I've never been to a seed swap, right? I mean, this is a first for me." So it's like, "Oh, this is great." And so one of the seeds that she gave me were these beans, and they're called Trail of Tear beans, and they have a really interesting history because when the Native Americans were forced out of their land and were on the Trail of Tears, one of their primary crops on the East Coast were these beans. And so they took all these beans, these seed with them, right, and went to Oklahoma and started growing them there because the climate worked and they could grow them. And that particular strain kind of lost its existence on the East Coast. And so these beans have now come back from Oklahoma and are being grown on the East Coast. So she's like, "Oh, you've got to share these, right? That's a great story and a really important story for this particular movement." Wow. Right? I mean, so it was really, kind of wild for me because I as someone who's not a farmer, I'm like, "Oh, wow, this is amazing, right? What an interesting culture." And we actually really are sort of spreading our politic with our seeds.
So, wow, you have shared a lot of great information. The people of Cambridge should be pleased. Say the website again, just one more time.
OccupyTheFarm.net.
All right. What's your first and last name?
I am Ross Glover.
It was a pleasure to have you. We have one more guest, Pan Angelopoulos. As we said before, we have a number of caucuses and working groups, and several of the people organize around tactical things. Like Occupy the Farm, like Occupy the Hood. Unfortunately, we had a guest for Occupy the Hood and the People of Color Working Group, Brian Cuobo. He, however, could not be here today. He has a 9-to-5, so we certainly support his decision to go to work. A lot of other people that were supposed to come here unfortunately couldn't, either because they had work or they had some other obligations. Unfortunately, we're not really reflective today. We don't really embody the diversity of the 99% that we are. Nonetheless, we have Pan, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about the Socialist Caucus. Pan, it's lovely to have us on the show.
Thanks.
Tell me about the Socialist Caucus.
Well, the Socialist Caucus isn't a working group in the strict sense, in that it's not a group that is specifically around some tactical thing in the camp. Everyone can take part in the caucus, and people from the caucus are involved in lots of different working groups, from outreach to the Free School University, the Boston Occupier. So it's more of a common space for people who are either interested in these ideas or who are interested in formulating a more radical criticism of the system as it exists, to share their ideas and meet other people who also have these ideas and think about how to move forward in
Right.
that sense.
Now, as far as when people hear socialism, they tend to have pictures of grainy footage of Brezhnev and his authoritarian policies towards this, and obviously in our public school systems, we're indoctrinated to believe that, socialism is a terrible thing, and which is why it's so easily equated to fascism. Tell the audience, what is socialism?
Well, so we realize what the situation is, and I think one of the things that we're doing is we're being honest about, because up until the Occupy movement, you couldn't even say something like that in the United States without someone exactly referring to one of those images. We have a lot of different backgrounds. We have people from all different kinds of socialist groups, communist groups, people who aren't in any group and are just becoming interested. And there's definitely the realization that the 20th century involved a lot of failures. It involved a lot of interesting experiments, that ended up as you described. And one of the objectives of the group is to try and sort of work around that, to get back to the basics of what is socialism. And basically, as long as capitalism is around, socialism and communism will be relevant, regardless of whether they are connected with these images. Because if you try and formulate a radical critique of the society, that's where you'll end up, at a system that believes sort of that the free development of each individual should be a condition for the free development of all, and that everyone should have their needs satisfied and contribute to the community according to their abilities. So there are some basic tenets. I definitely say, we're very much in favor of a democratic socialism. If there's one thing that sort of socialists and Marxists, etc., learn from the 20th century, is that as great as a popular power you are, and as much organizing as you're able to do, if you don't maintain the democratic element and the participatory element, and that's one of the great things about the Occupy movement, then there is a chance that the movement will get bureaucratized and that it will degenerate into some sort of state capitalism, or something that definitely turns people, working people, all kinds of people, away from the movement. So, everyone in the group has very different ideas about what they consider exactly socialism and how to get there. I think there's a general conception that it involves some sort of exercise of power, not necessarily state power, in the sense that it's not possible to change capitalism just by sort of having experiments in its periphery, but that's one of the ways to work forward. And so as a socialist caucus, we put these ideas out there. We emphasize sort of complete independence from the Democrats and the Republicans. We want nothing to do, and we're going to try and have a declaration passed. Not that we don't support reforms, and we obviously support all kinds of reforms, when we, especially from sort of the progressive wing of the Democrats. But we are emphasizing political independence and generally decentralized planning, workplace democracy, the building of a more rational system of distribution.
Okay. Now, as far as the Socialist Caucus and its presence at protests, can we say definitively that the Socialist Caucus, or that there is a socialist contingent? I see a lot of American flags. Can we see black and red? Can we expect to see black and red?
Yeah, I think that sort of symbolic part has also, in some sense, been taken care of. I mean, we have sort of those flags, and that's one of the ways that people are interested in asking, what is this about? What are these flags about, and what are you about? So there is a contingent building, I think, and since the first days of the Occupy movement, this contingent has definitely grown. People involved who weren't necessarily socialists before, who might not necessarily identify as socialists or communists, but who are interested in this sort of radical criticism of the society, and who basically understand. And that's what we're trying to. That's one of the things that I won't say try to explain, because this is a very sort of organic process. I mean, the caucus is organically a part of a movement. It's not people coming in and saying, this is, you know, what we have to do to change society, and you have to just follow, you know, what we're saying.
Now, some people would say that the Socialist Caucus was kind of absent during the occupation itself, and that they remained too kind of ideologically rigid. Now, what would you contend to those people?
Well, I mean, the people, I mean, a lot of different people, like Brian, you mentioned before, are part of Occupy in so many ways. They just don't necessarily identify as socialists.
Right.
I mean, they don't I mean, that doesn't necessarily. It's not something that gets brought up every day. So I don't think it's been absent in any sense. The group in itself has been absent, and one of the reasons is, we want to be organically connected to the movement. We're part of the movement. We have people come to meetings who maybe come to one meeting, don't come to the next, are in various working groups. It's not an exclusive group in any sense, and that's why I emphasize that it's not a working group. It's just a space for these ideas to develop. So as far as doing something more concrete, I mean, there are various things that, I mean, people have very much been involved in the foreclosure actions that are being planned, and basically every aspect here, from farming that some of the guests talk about, and the copyrights, intellectual property rights. That is something that is very much within the realm of what do we mean? Is it possible to get rid of these intellectual copyrights without undermining the fundamental property basis of the society? And if your answer to that is no, then you realize that maybe you have to start sort of thinking more broadly about how the system works. And that's why sort of one of the things is that we don't believe at all that, and again, these are just broad ideas because everyone has very different ideas, come from different groups, etc., is that the problems we face today are not caused by greedy politicians or corrupt politicians and bankers who just took the bailout money. I mean, we're really trying to see what is the root of the problem, beyond sort of the bailouts and beyond things like this.
Now, how many people are part of this caucus?
Well, we have more than, I think, 150 or so people on the Facebook group, at least, and the email list. I mean, not everyone is as involved. Some people are more so, some people are less so. There is a fair amount of people. To our meetings, we usually get about 15 people. We have weekly meetings. It's still, as you said, these are ideas that seem very foreign to many people, especially in this country, and there's a reason for that, because of what happened in the 20th century and what these words are associated with. But in the end, right now, capitalism is probably entering one of the most probably ruthless phases in the past 100 years or so. There have been reforms over the years, and especially during the post-World War II period. But those reforms were in place because there were strong popular movements, not in this country, but generally socialist movements everywhere else, that kept the pressure and on the people who had power, on the 1%. And were able to have these reforms and solidified reforms, like everything from the New Deal to the 8-hour workday. So one of the things we're saying is that you need movements of this sort that sort of challenge capitalism head on, just to get even minimal reforms. If you don't attempt to go for the whole thing, for the overthrow of the system, it's likely that you're not even going to get sort of any crumbs off the table. So that's one of the...
Now, as far as the means of production, much of what Marxist criticism talks about is who controls the means of production. Would you favor, what would be your ideal enterprise or mode of production if you yourself could choose?
Well, I mean, there are lots of there are lots of important lessons from Marx and all of the classics of Marxism, so to speak, to learn from. But this is as well the 21st century, and so we really have to be creative. I don't think there's any group or any individual who can say this is what we have to do. It used to be the idea that as soon as you nationalize something and put it in state hands, that would fix the problems. It proved that had created problems of its own. So this is, I think, very much something that that has to be developed experimentally. There are worker cooperatives springing up everywhere. There's I don't know if people are aware of the Cleveland model in Cleveland, Ohio, where there's a whole set of cooperative worker-owned enterprises springing up that are actually very profitable. Everyone's the owner of the enterprise, very good working conditions, very good wages, very competitive in regard to the private sector. So that's one of the things. And Garo Alperovitz actually has a new book coming out. He spoke in Occupy Boston as part of the Howard Zinn Memorial Lectures, which is something that the caucus is very involved in, bringing various sort of radical academics and activists. And he has a new book called America Beyond Capitalism, where he describes the whole sort of the thousands actually of municipal land trusts and cooperative enterprises and worker-owned factories, etc., that are springing up throughout the United States. So there is a debate as to whether this is, in regard to the means of production, whether you can actually change the fabric of society with these sorts of actions. But it's definitely a start, and as I said, this is definitely something you have to experiment with, working out how exactly to shift the power and the ownership structures.
Right. Now, what kinds of industries are these cooperative enterprises and worker-owned co-ops in?
Well, a lot of them are basically, you have all sorts of industries, service industries. Most of them, the defining the fact is that they're small, mostly. It is harder to run a larger enterprise, but not necessarily so. There have been attempts to have sort of steel mills, worker-owned, etc. But it's been proven that even when it was profitable for companies to sell, for instance, their factory, which they didn't want to work, to the workforce, they resisted it because, obviously that would undermine the basis of society if people saw that it's possible to run these factories without bosses, without overseers. So most of them there's laundromats, there's bread factories, there's the famous case of the Republic windows that, most of them are small industries, sort of small, not heavy industries, medium scale services, that sort of thing.
Oh, excuse me. One other thing I wanted to ask you, as far as unions are concerned, what's your worry about institutions like the SEIU or the AFL-CIO or United Auto Workers and their sort of vertically integrated process in possibly undermining the Occupy movement?
Well, we're definitely in full solidarity with all the unions, and we believe the union is one of the most effective places to wage a struggle. I mean, we saw the general strike in Oakland. It was a first attempt, and it didn't really, shut down the city to the extent they were hoping for, but it puts tactics and tools like the general strike back on the table, which, for instance, wasn't used in Wisconsin last year, and if it had been used, it could have change the situation. So we're very supportive of especially the union rank and file. Right now, I think that's for the workers in the unions to work out how they're going to change their structures. Obviously, in a union, eventually you need some sort of vertical form of integration. But the fact that sort of these union leaders have turned their backs time and time again on the workers themselves and have refused sort of to stand behind the more radical segments of the working class, and that goes back to the 1970s when sort of the union leaders who are now sort of jumping on the Occupy movement actually sort of would not support would isolate the rank and file sort of militants. So we're very much in favor of sort of unions and supporting them, like the Verizon strike in Boston and SEIU, especially the Massachusetts Nurse Association. Very depending on the union, it gets from more sort of conservative to more radical. But I think that is something that the unions will have to work on. The people who are sort of at the head of the union, so to speak, the professional unionists, which is really a contradiction in terms. Like a unionist has to be at the workplace every day, has to have some organic connection with.
Has to actually know how to do the job.
Exactly. Whereas if you have these union leaders who are just in Washington, debating, why didn't sort of the UAW ask for the General Motors to be sort of put fully in government hands? I mean, what happened now? General Motors, they were nationalized. The government paid off their debts basically, and then they were put into private hands again. That was a loss for the government, and a gain basically at the expense of some of the rights that the UAW had won for the workers.
Now, one of the things I wanted to make a point, obviously, if a business is given the right, and certainly in this country they are, to organize around capital, it's the right of their workers to organize around labor. Now, when we talked about cooperative enterprises, though, if cooperative enterprises become the norm, and sort of between the co-ops and maybe sole proprietorships and partnerships between the two in various circumstances, doesn't that sort of render a union irrelevant? Because, I mean, if a strike takes place in a co-op, I mean, you're not going to strike, if you're part of a co-op, because you're going to hurt yourself.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely a contradiction. And when we get to the point that there are so many co-ops that, they're actually undermining the private sector, that will be an issue to discuss. But I mean, right now, for the vast majority of the labor force, they don't own where they work. And if they did, especially when it's on a small scale, maybe you're right, maybe there wouldn't be a use for a union in that case. But to get to a point like that, which would basically be sort of a socialist organization if all workers, I mean, you would have superseded the needs for unions as well. So there is a contradiction there, but sort of in practice, maybe it won't come up as soon. But the union is still sort of mediating. I mean, if you could run an enterprise, how are you going to run it? You're not going to be able to run it just by everyone you can't have a GA every day, let's say at a factory, a general assembly. So you would have to do this through the union actually if you owned it running the enterprise. And there would be people who had positions of responsibility, and this at various times in history where there have been worker-owned enterprises, they have elected people to have specific positions of authority and responsibility, but they can be recalled. They're accountable on a daily basis to everyone else. So there is some balance between everyone owning the enterprise and having as well some sort of organization, maybe within a union, to make sure that it's actually able to work on a daily basis.
Now, union membership over the last 50 years, since really the National Labor Relations Act was kind of overturned with pieces of legislation that were passed in the 40s and 50s. Only about 8 to 10% of the American workforce is unionized.
Yes.
So should people start unionizing? I mean, people have, for example, public school teachers have unions. They have collective bargaining power. Private school teachers do not. They have benefits associations, but they don't have. They're not unionized. Could you explain the difference?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a problem that is, I think, maybe it wouldn't be an overstatement to say it's the most basic problem in the labor movement today, and that is that a lot of the union structures are better tuned to a different form of enterprise. So it's very easy. It's not very easy, but in teachers, in schools, for instance, and to a greater extent in factories, let's say, where people work together, sleep together, live in the same neighborhood, everyone knows each other and everyone's doing the same work, and you see what your fellow workers do. It's much easier to have a union and to have these sort of fights and struggles. And when when capitalism's sort of organization has changed so much over the past 40 years in countries like the US, where you have decentralized work, where you have a lot of the people who are no longer working in factories but working as pizza delivery men and part-time teachers and all these jobs that really have no stability, then there needs to be a new form of organizing. And until unions are able to the left and the Occupy movement and everyone is part of this, to find new ways of organizing people, because it's evident that you can't use the same tactic that the CIO used in the 1930s, for instance, when it organized thousands of factories. That tactic is not as simple to apply to, it may be in China, of course it is, and in countries where
well, you mentioned people who pizza delivery, food delivery people. Most of those businesses themselves are, very small businesses. Yeah. Now, sometimes they're part of buying groups.
Yeah.
Now, so they're networked. how do the workers themselves, people who may only be making less than the minimum wage plus whatever their tip may be, paying their own gas money, how do people like that, how can they come together when people who work for one Chinese restaurants may not communicate with people at all who work in the pizzeria next door?
Yeah, no, that is a problem, definitely. But I mean, it's also important to remember that while there is a lot of that small business aspect, I mean, how many drivers and cooks and waiters does Domino's have? And you look at cases like Starbucks. So even though there is that issue that you're talking about, and of course, small businesses are always very different to work around, and workers in small business can't strike, and they have different kinds of demands. But I think the tendency generally is for small businesses to be eliminated, and so it is once you it's been a rule throughout sort of labor history that once you organize and once you get certain rights in the big companies, the big businesses in each sector, then that sort of in some sense filters down to the smaller sectors as well. So I mean, the first priority I think is these new these companies like Starbucks and Domino's and these huge sort of service or food industries, whatever, that have sort of I mean, as you might know, sort of in Starbucks, the IWW has been doing some organizing, but generally there are these companies that have no form of organization whatsoever, no form of union. Not to mention Walmart, where people are fired. People, there's a huge there's a system of abuses actually that goes on in companies like that. So I think the basic issue is, and I mean, think of how many employees Walmart has. If you could unionize Walmart, and there have been a lot of attempts to that, and there are a lot of militant people working at Walmart, etc. What a huge impact that would have on workers and people throughout the country. So I mean, I think the issue is getting, being able to face these new forms of business as they're being done, that it's no longer based around the old heavy industries, and that there's this sort of what people have talked about recently, especially sort of some academics, etc., have sort of they've talked about moving sort of from the what Marx called the proletariat to the precariat, basically from the word precarious, that these people just have precarious living situations, no permanent job, part-time hours, you never know when you're going to get called up, no pension plans, healthcare, you never know what's going to happen about that. So I mean, you have to organize around these new concerns that people have, and the ironic thing is that even though there has been so much growth and capitalism is growing as a system and producing more wealth, yet people, especially in services and industries like that, seem to be getting less and less of that. So that, I think that's one of the main issues, and there are these classes are being redefined in today's era, and we definitely have to think about that. And that hopefully that's what the Socialist Caucus is about, thinking about these issues in formulating a broader criticism of society.
One last question: what is austerity, and what does it mean to you?
Well, I mean, austerity, as you know, in Europe it's been a huge thing. In the U.S. it's going to be a huge thing as well. It's it's a veiled, not a veiled actually, attack on workers and people's rights everywhere, because together with austerity, under the rug, you lose collective agreements, job agreements, and the healthcare system gets undermined, social security gets undermined. So it would be fair to say that in today's era in Europe and the U.S. definitely austerity is the dominant form of class warfare, in that it's an assault basically on working people everywhere. And that's one of the things that we have to combat, definitely. And you saw that with the Super Committee. There was the Jobs Not Cuts campaign, supported by various people, the Green Party, Noam Chomsky, some socialist groups. And what they were saying is that we have to resist these cuts, and we have to prove that there's an alternative. Because a lot of the people, if you speak to and you say, what do you think about austerity? They're going to say, it's a crisis. Everyone has to cut back. What we're trying to say is, you don't have to cut back, because the people who caused this crisis aren't cutting back. The banks right now, the Wall Street banks, are sitting on, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think it's somewhere around $900 billion of reserves. Now you see that they're not making any cutbacks. Businesses aren't making any cutbacks to salaries, and yet people are being forced to make all these cutbacks. And what we're trying to say is that there is an alternative.
Right.
Just to give you one example, sort of the Merrill Lynch sort of wealth management company, which monitors the wealth of
Right.
so-called high net worth individuals, has found that of the 2.9 million high net worth individuals in the U.S., literally the 1%, and this is why sort of the Occupy movement actually, in some sense, from the beginning had the socialist element when it talked about the 99% to 1%. That's the first sort of basic class dichotomy. But these individuals own about in investable assets that is beyond their homes, beyond their cars, beyond their works of art. You're not saying that you're gonna seize everything, but in just investable assets, they have about $12 trillion. And viewers can look that up. It's a statistic. So when they say that we have to reduce the debt by $1 trillion or $2 trillion, and they make people feel like they're responsible for this debt, as if people had a choice when their wages have been stagnant for the past 30 years, whether or not to get out a loan to send their kids to school, or to to be able to get a car to go to work. And everything. And so when these people are being blamed essentially for the debt and for taking these government services, we have to say that there have been persistent cutbacks, and that it's only going to get worse, and that you really have to organize and say, look, we're not going to pay for this crisis. And in this country and in every country, working people, and not just working people in a broader sense, the environment, which is that's completely off the table now. No one's talking about in the good times of capitalism, when there's enough to go around. You have all these representatives of like Al Gore talking about sustainable green capitalism. No one's talking about that anymore, because now I think and what we realize as a socialist caucus is that we are entering neoliberalism definitely is going to enter one of its most sort of a phase actually when democracy and capitalism aren't necessarily going to go together anymore. So I think the challenge right now is to see what's happening, to see that in Greece and Egypt and everywhere, it's been proven that when democracy collides with profits and with the 1%'s interests, they're going to go around democracy. They don't mind, if we have to go back to.
I mean, there have been capitalist dictatorships before. I mean, Chile was a capitalist dictatorship.
Exactly. But we're seeing that now that's happening in the so-called first world, where we weren't used to that. People used to just watch on the news what was happening in Chile or Guatemala or Egypt and say that's a terrible situation. But now we're seeing that in the first world itself. I mean, look at this debt crisis. It struck Italy, which is the 7th largest economy in the world. So we're seeing these are new challenges, and these are we have to think about this given, and especially in the U.S., the belly of the beast, so to speak. The center of global capitalism. I think we have to realize that if we don't confront U.S. imperialism and the interests of the 1% in the U.S. head on, there's no way to solve any of the problems anywhere in the world, because they are organically linked. And you mentioned, I think that in this sense there are some hopeful elements, because there have been, starting from the Wisconsin, who could imagine the Occupy movement a year ago? Starting from the Wisconsin movement, and then you have the Arab Spring, the revolts in Europe. All these sort of in Venezuela, what's going on? It's very interesting with the Bolivarian revolution, and in Chile especially, which is something that hasn't gotten much press in the U.S. There's been a huge movement. Indigenous groups have connected with environmental groups and the huge sort of mine workers unions and the working class generally, and the students, who in some sense are very much ahead of us in that they have plans about how to offer free quality public education to everyone. They have one of the most reactionary education systems there, worse than here, where students are saddled with debt, where there's no chance to get into a university without funding from a private enterprise. And they have plans ready, and they say this is how we're going to offer free quality education to everyone. So on that note, I think it's interesting that where sort of this form of capitalism was born in 1973, sort of on September 11th, 1973, sort of that blood-drenched day when the generals took power and sort of executed thousands of activists. In that country, neoliberalism sort of has been dealt its first sort of blow, in that people are organizing in Chile, and they're ahead of us and they're ahead of everyone basically, and they know what they want, and they're asking for the whole thing. So I think that's something that we should be hopeful about, but also think about how to face the situation in the U.S.
I see. Well, it's a multinational movement. It's a global movement that transcends the concept of nation state itself. and you did a wonderful job of articulating it. So,
But I think, I mean, that's an important division, sort of, you know. I think it's important to be in solidarity on a global level. But I mean, if you look at the anti-globalization movement, and those are some of the pitfalls we're trying to
the
avoid.
global populist
They just
movement.
they focused on the global issue as a whole, and eventually it was very hard to win sort of reforms and changes in certain countries. So I mean, I think it's still, you can still organize on a national basis and at the same time have solidarity with the rest of the world and sort of build sort of a new international, so to speak.
It was very
All right,
fruitful
thank
to
you.
have you on. Corporations, folks. Corporations. They are quite an evil little thing that we're combating. It's gotten to the point where they have actually procured their rights as people. Since the Santa Clara versus Pacific Railroad, it was the judge's opinion that a corporation was in fact a person. And wave after wave of court decisions have followed, and we have Terra Nova coming back on to speak about the issue of corporate personhood. Terra, thank you very much for coming back on.
Hi, Zoe. Thank you for talking about this really important topic.
Well,
So many folks don't know that they've basically been sold as property to the Commonwealth and then to the federal government, who has subjugated us to the corporations through contracts with the state. Personhood is a very important concept because the constitutional rights allow us the right to pursue happiness and to have certain rights as individuals, as human beings. If the corporations are allowed to have those same rights, they basically can destroy our communities, because our communities would stand in the way of their pursuing happiness. And so what happens is that, I'm on TV so I can do this. So at the very top level, when we had the American Revolution, we fought the United Kingdom, and we structured our government to be amazingly just like that same hierarchical government, where the very top federal level makes a contract with businesses and then makes a contract with the state as a subjugated contract, which then makes a contract with the municipality, which is subjugated, and then the piece or person is actually sold or is claimed as all of the resources provided in that geographic territory. Well, all the resources include the people, believe it or not. So that means that we are subjugated to the municipality, which is then subjugated to the state, which then is subjugated to the feds, which sell or make the contract with the corporations.
Right.
So the state is in effect set up contractually to enforce the obligations of the contract with the corporations to pursue their happiness. So the entire system is set up to serve them.
now, didn't there used to be expiration dates or term limits on corporations? Didn't they have they have to be drafted for the purposes of very strict business procedures? Didn't they expire? I mean, weren't there corporations or business institutions like the Hudson Bay Company, which was a shipping company in the in the 1700s, or the Dutch India Bay Company that existed? I mean, weren't there corporate entities that the propertied class that overthrew the English aristocracy were against?
Well, yes, certainly, but the whole fabric of the system is set up for them to just renew the terms. Because the people who are negotiating the terms are the people who are the politicians who are elected using the campaign money from the corporations. So
Right.
the whole system is set up for, in a sense, failure for the communities. I've been working with the Democracy School, if you'd like me to talk about that a little bit, because that allows individuals in small groups and communities to actually construct bylaws to challenge the very existence of personhood, because there is a large group of people who believe that corporate personhood doesn't actually exist, that it's a claim that it exists, and that claim is being held up in court. So if you, as a community, small towns, can actually create bylaws, over 100 towns and cities have done this, including the city of Pittsburgh, to actually contradict those case law
Right.
findings, that then the corporation either has to do business with the municipality on an equal peer level, Or they can go all the way back to the Supreme Court. Well, does Nestle really want to go all the way to Supreme Court to fight Gloucester for its water? Probably not. So they're either going to make terms that the community actually agrees with, or they're going to end up with a huge federal case fighting against small town America in the Supreme Court.
So this is sort of a way for individuals in the town to unify
That's
themselves
right.
as a community.
That's right. So we could do that today, the city today, by, with petition actions. It would take you 9 months to, anywhere from 9 months to a couple years to get these laws in place to protect your communities. And you can write anything into it. You can protect your water, you can protect your town character, you can protect intellectual property rights, whether it be, you have copyright things. You can actually challenge those at the federal level, at the local level. So you can create these laws with a petition, because it's you can call a town meeting or a city council vote or a ballot vote, put it on the ballot, and everybody will vote.
Now, as far as corporate personhood itself, there have been many strategies to revoke this and to get, or at least get the conversation going. And one of them is a constitutional Congress.
Well, I believe that we need a constitutional Congress, but I also believe we shouldn't wait, because it takes so long to get through all of that. We're talking a decade, to organize and do this and do that and then fight the battle in the public. Whereas your local community can create these laws right now. So to me, the language has to run, or I say the strategy in a sense runs on many levels. So you have all these parallel things happening at once. So yes, pursue a constitutional Congress. Yes, move to amend. Yes, go for Citizens United overturn. Do all these things, but get going. Get your town together, get your people together to decide what it is they want to protect. Get your petitions in order and start moving.
I see. Now, as far as campaigns are concerned, one of the ways that corporations are able to wedge their political muscle is simply by political bribery, and that's a little bit more difficult to fight at the local level.
It is indeed, at any level. But what you need, if you have citizens that are willing to look at campaign finance, all the statements, I can show people how to do it. They can contact me anytime they want. TaraForActon.com, or just search my name. Volunteer at OccupyBoston.org. Write in and tell me what you want to do, and we'll show you how. Because you can activate, you can organize, and you can get a lot of things done in a short period of time, believe it or not. So, what was the question again? Politicians. Yes, for example. I won't name any names, but I am constantly on certain politicians in my region. And I'm always looking at where the money's coming from. I'm always challenging the language that they're creating in the legislation to say, well, Jay, that's awfully convenient for so-and-so who happens to be your donor. So you're always on it. So we have watchdogs that are watching specific politicians. And if a person is concerned about that politician, you call up. In fact, we should create a webpage to connect everybody to show who's watching who. That's a good idea. I'll do that today. So, like, for example, somebody was having a problem in one town, and they said, gee, the person that's the head of the committee at the State House is in your district, so he answers to your voters. So can you get a bunch of your voters to pressure this guy to do the right thing? So I was like, okay, show me how what the right thing is that you think is, and then I checked it with a bunch of activists to see if we all agreed, and then we went after it. So we started writing letters to the guy like this, right, and things happen. So you figure out how to work within the system to get the things that you want to change the system, and you do those micro steps and you hit it hard and you hit it constantly. And I've been doing this for 30 years. So the movement for me is the coming together of all these groups together so that we can become a stronger force for the things that we collectively all already sort of were doing. But now we have like 10 times, 100 times more people. Everybody's just coming out of the woodwork to say, what do we do? And so now we have these forces, so we have to decide how to collectively use them. We're doing road mapping now, and we're getting all the activists together to try and create like how the web all fits together so that we can create priorities on, what's do we do move to amend? How do we do move to amend? Do we do the farms? Can we do all this stuff and just give direction? Because you have people in Alabama, for example, who called and said, well, what do we do? And I said, oh, geez, you got to organize the farmers. So they're like, what a good idea. And that was really easy. So we have these conference calls that we talk nationally, and we just say, golly, I say, what's your biggest problem? So they say their biggest problem, and then we all sit around saying, well, what should they do? What should they do? And so after that, in 20 minutes, we often help them organize their whole situation, because they just didn't even think to organize the farmers.
Now, as far as corporations are concerned and, their ability to sway, Have there been mechanisms or laws passed? I mean, obviously there was McCain-Feingold passed in 1999. Now there's, of course, Citizens United, which is of course going to usher in a not really a new era, but certainly an era on paper of unadulterated political spending. Now, what do you tell people who say something to the effect of, well, it's their money, they should be able to spend it however they want?
Well, what I say is really what you're doing is you're increasing the cost of goods and services sold to pay for campaigns. So what you're saying, for example, in the union case, for example, because I see unions as, in a sense, a corporation in and of itself. And so just because they believe in workers' rights, I mean, I'm pro-union in the sense that I think that good working conditions and appropriate representation is important, and the ability for workers to organize is important. But to say, okay, just because I stand for that, then you have an organization who has no oversight. And
Right.
you can give salaries all you want, you can do whatever you want, and they have their own internal issues too. So, for example, I'm told that unions are given bonuses, employees are given bonuses, that then they are supposed to filter to the politicians. Okay? So is that any different than a corporation who is giving bonuses and told to filter it to politicians? No, it isn't. And so having money in campaigns at all, to me, is wrong.
Yeah.
That y'all should get, 10 grand, and that's it. Bang. If you can't run if you can't run a campaign on 10 grand, people don't like you enough. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, if people can't come out and vote for you, and you can't tell people you got free cable access everywhere, for God's sakes. If you can't use the public resources to get your message across and be a public servant, then you aren't much of a public servant in my world.
So essentially what you're saying is that a person's ability to run for public office shouldn't be hinged upon their ability to finance the campaign.
You shouldn't be doing if you're right now, if you're a politician, you're a fundraiser. You aren't a public
Yeah.
servant. I'm sorry. I could go on and on about this stuff because
Well,
I've run for office.
We're on television right now. I
and
want you to go on and on about
all
this
right,
stuff.
So, I don't want to dominate the thing. But so, for example, I ran for office, and people are like, well, you got to go get donations. I said, no, I'm a public servant. If you want to go get donations, you go ahead and go get donations. Well, you have to appear at these places so that people will pay money into the donation. I'm like, but those aren't the people that we need to serve. We're already serving them because they're, rich.
Yeah.
And they don't have any, problems. Let's go and figure out where the problems are, and then we figure out how to serve the people, and then use the stakeholders. You can't spend time gathering information from stakeholders and serving the stakeholders at the same time you're just going around collecting money.
Yeah.
You can't do it. So I think we should just take money out of politics altogether. But that's
Okay.
that's that, because until we do, the system is just completely, we're bought and sold, and we all know that, and that's why we're here. So
It's a
really, what
fact
I
of
want to talk
life.
about is how to help people get organized to do this work, because they have more power than they know,
Okay.
and the more they sit still, the more they're bought and sold.
Now, you were mentioning protecting resources like water. Now, what other resources do you think that people could protect that are considered public or part of the
Everything.
public supply?
Think about it. Your intelligence, your children's intelligence, the education system, the concept of heritage, where our heritages, our seeds, the wealth. So if somebody's spending our future because they're using our resource, so they're taking the water, the land, and using it for profit, and taking the profit offshore. Okay, they've extracted the value from our community. And what are we left with? The bill, basically. So it's like we wouldn't even subscribe to the currency system under that plan. You see? So why do you have debt that we then are paying? So why don't we just say, forget about the currency system? Well, I'll tell you, there's a lot of people that are sweating it, that might be what is exactly going to happen. Okay? So in my world, the best national defense is a strong local economy. So if you don't have a local economy and all your money's getting taken out by global companies to other countries or wherever, and you're left with the debt, so you're enslaved into this debt, it's completely setting you up for failure. For example, and you have to vote with your dollars. Every single person out here votes with their dollars every day. We did a study. Concord, Massachusetts did a study that showed that if you spend $1 at a farm, that 92% of that money stays local. If you spend $1 at a local franchise, a local office store, locally owned toy store, that 40% of that money stays local. If you spend $1 at a global franchise, I'm not gonna pick on one, but big office supply company, say,
Office Max.
15% of that money stays local. Where does the rest of it go? Okay, some of it goes to federal, to Texas, but you saw the article yesterday that half of the companies half of the global companies based in Massachusetts didn't pay a penny of income tax in Massachusetts.
Now,
So-
so they didn't pay any state income tax. Did they pay federal income tax? Are there other ways of recuperating some of those losses?
Yes, but why not? Why take them away? Pay government people, bloated government, to process money and then trickle back a little bit to us? That's insane. Why take it in the first place? So you got to protect your resources, your air, your water. Every time a building goes up, the whole concept about growth and development. Oh yeah, we need growth. Everybody gets excited because there's growth. Well, if it's the wrong growth, what you're doing is you're feeding the system that feeds the concrete, which takes the resources, takes it away, and trickles some back down on top of you.
Yeah.
So it's like you shouldn't congratulate that there's big growth. You should look at the little components of growth and say, was it growth of the farm? Was it growth? Was it growth in alternative energy? So
Did people become more
Yes,
self-sufficient?
Exactly. So that's the kind of growth that we want, not just economic GDP growth. GDP growth is like buying into a system that's totally screwing us. So we can't do that. In the new economics, there's actually courses in new economics at these beautiful institutions that we have here that are showing us how to think in terms of new economics and valuing things. So back to the water again.
Right.
So if right now the regulations don't protect your water, they prevent activists from stopping corporations. It's really important to understand that. The regulations do not protect the water. If you ask any water activist, the regulations set it up for how long you have to permit, what forms you have to fill out, what things you have to fill in, what tests you have to make, and then you're done. Go look at all the streams and all the algae that's growing and the plants that are dying and the fishes that come with 3 eyes, okay? It's not working because it sets up the system to regulate the activists, just like we are regulated down in Dewey Square. We regulate the activists and the problems go away, right?
Or do they?
So over time, it proves. And if you look at the systems, if you look at the food, if you look at obesity, you look at all these infrastructural problems, they're not going away. They're just getting worse, and we've got to do something. And I could go on for this. I could go on for hours like this. So I'm sure that there's a time limit here.
Well, what we're going to do is we're going to bring everybody that's still here back on stage. So you're going to stay,
Well,
and
I'll
everybody's
just-
going to bring their
Oops,
chair,
I'm
and
tall
we are
and-
going to crowd in.
Crowding in.
And we're going to have a little 18-minute panel discussion.
All on that side here or split?
Yeah, come on in. That side. That's a good side. That's mine. All right, folks. And
We can
I'll
sit
push
staggered
in.
and just have our heads coming in. How's that? Yeah. So yes. So move back and sit back with your knees in like this. How's that? We sort of are doing this actually.
Yeah. No, we've got enough
So sit on
room.
back.
There's 4 of us.
So it's
Yeah,
the
we're
TV,
in.
TV won't
We're
know
good.
that we're not on the same plane.
Brandon's not quite in.
I'm over
Brandon.
here.
All right. We'll see.
Come on.
We can just move in.
I want a black panda.
So you
No,
can
no,
move in
alright.
some more.
All right.
You can move in some more. 'Cause
Yeah, we're good.
All right.
you're
All right.
I'm in.
So
Right, but Zoe can move this away and they can move in. So.
now,
All right. There you go.
so we're 5 people from Occupy Boston. I'm Zoe White. This is what we do.
I mean,
Twinkle
maybe
fingers when we like something. Introduce. We're just gonna have a little go around.
All right.
We are not reflective of the 99%, by the way. We only have 1 woman here. Unfortunately, Stephanie couldn't make it. She's hopefully being absolved of any legal wrongdoing, at least on New Chardon Street. Ping Pong, I want to give you a shout out. Chaser, I wish you were here. Brian, Kwame, all of you. What we're going to do in the future is hopefully have embody the diversity that is reflective of the 99% that we are. We need people of color. We need women. We need queer and trans people like myself to be represented on this show. And, we've talked about a lot of interesting issues. We've talked about the agrarian issue. We've talked about corporations themselves. We've talked about attacking the institutions and unifying around cooperative enterprises. And, we've talked about ways of communicating this. But, what else can we do?
We can talk about ourselves.
Oh, we can. What? Maybe we should say how other people can
Get
can
involved.
get involved.
Oh yes, right in.
I mean, if people
Go
are
ahead.
out there. Well, so I can. When we had a physical camp, it was pretty easy to get involved. You just had to
Show up
go
at
down to
Dewey
the show
Square.
up. Right. So now it is a little more. It's a little more complicated. If you want to get involved, and there's a particular working group or caucus or group of people that you want to get involved with, I think probably the easiest way to go about that is to go to the wiki.
We'll go to the website, right?
Right.
Volunteer at
OccupyBoston.
occupiedboston.org, or choose on the right-hand side. There's a volunteer link, which has a whole list of things, including a link to the working groups and some descriptions of volunteer opportunities.
Okay. OccupyBoston.org. Say again what you wanted to do for the radio station. It's OccupyBoston.org/radio, correct?
Right. So if you want to get involved with the radio station, you can show up at our meetings. There's going to be a meeting today at 4 and then tomorrow at 4 at Encuentro Cinco in Chinatown.
That's on 33 Harrison Avenue, the 5th floor.
Right. So you can just show up to one of our meetings, or when we're having a show, you can call in, and if you're listening and you want to call in, we have a studio number now, so you can call in and ask for some info about how you can help with a particular show or something like that.
Pam, would you like to mention when this next Socialist Caucus meeting will be?
Yeah, the next one will be on Sunday at Encuentro Cinco. I'm not sure if the time has been decided, but it should be on the Occupy Boston website when it is. And another event I wanted to let our viewers know, since we discussed it on the 20th of January at 6 p.m. There's an event at Encuentro Cinco again from Occupied Workers Control. And there will be various people from the union movement and some authors of a new book that just came out called Ours to Master and to Own. It's a huge compilation of articles. Some of the authors have already been to the Zinn School. So that's on the 20th at 6 p.m. if people are interested about some of these issues.
Now, what can be said about direct action? What does the group have any opinion as far as, why don't we just hurl a brick through the Fed? And this isn't a call to
Then the
action.
window would just be broken, and then there we have.
Well, it would, cost some money and maybe create a nice temp job.
Well, how about the tiny tents effort? Do we know about the tiny tents effort? It just started. So what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to download a piece of paper or download a file and print out a piece of paper, cut it up into little blocks and fold them, and there'll be little tents, and the tents will have a message. So for example, you can go and leave one in the dressing room at the fancy gown store, and it'll say there are 80,000 people homeless, so it'll give a message, and you can leave the tents everywhere. And you can write a message saying this bank does this and leave it at the ATM. So you can just leave little tents everywhere.
Now, you were talking about the farms, and just Monsanto seems to be, if they were a person, I would just not want to hang out with that person.
Well, I wouldn't want to hang out with that person either, but what I would do is our Occupy the Farms first action a couple of weeks ago during the Unity March, Day of Unity? What was the
Day of Unity.
Day of Unity, whatever.
Day of Action.
I wasn't here actually for it. I was in Asheville with farmers, but we actually went. If you don't know, there is a Monsanto office in Boston, in Cambridge actually. It's 245 First Street,
Something like that, yeah. It's down by Kendall.
And so
245 First Street.
our action, if you go to occupythefarm.net, there are some pictures. There's an image gallery of our first action, which was actually to take the agricultural public license to Monsanto, to take at least a simulation of seeds and paste it on this door that surprisingly has no it's no sign. There's signage all over this business park except for Monsanto. It's this like secret office that exists there. So our direct action was in fact to go to Monsanto and say, hey, this is Monsanto and we are not happy about what you're doing. Here's our public license.
Wow.
So that was...
We've actually talked about doing direct actions to the shareholder meetings and bringing 100 people, I don't know whether might check, at least get some news coverage, but to take specific proposals. So if you have 1 million people that all buy one share, it starts to become
Right.
a big block.
Shareholder by proxy, I believe that's called. We actually did that at a Coca-Cola shareholder meeting in Wilmington, Delaware, and we were able to stack the actual meeting that took place. And you had wave after wave of people talking about how communal water supplies were being abused in India, about how child labor was being used to cut sugarcane in El Salvador, and of course about how union leaders were being killed in Colombia. At bottling plants because they wouldn't take a wage cut of basically be having 2/3 of their wages cut. Isidro Gil, I believe, was the name of the person that was working for the Panamco plant, which is a subsidiary of Coca-Cola. Wow. So say the Monsanto address one more time.
245 First Street, Cambridge, Massachusetts. I believe that's correct. It's right there. You can't miss it. Well, you actually can miss it. But
Right, because they're
you
going to great lengths not
Yes,
to make it so that no one gets it, so so that everyone misses it. So
could I would like to talk about the other group that Brandon and I are involved in. And this is actually a place where direct action can happen.
awesome.
So Brandon and I actually, and Occupy Boston Radio emerged out of this group, which is OBIT, Occupy Boston IT, the technology group. And so there are lots of reasons why I wanted to bring this up. One is because Tara fundamentally offended me the other day by saying,
I was
you're just a
teasing.
service group.
I want to explain this.
So I was like, oh, okay.
Girl!
No,
That's
stop
how you,
it. Stop. Wait, you've
no-
accused me.
No, I'm not. No, it happened. I'm just saying that like sort of made me recognize that even though Occupy Boston, as the GA of Occupy Boston, has made one of the most profound technological political decisions of the entire Occupy movement, in which the GA approved leaving Google and going with a non-proprietary platform for communications. Amazing decision. I mean, it's a first for the Occupy movement, and it is a direct action. So a lot of people don't realize that the technology that we use, when we use it, we're supporting the same fundamental capitalist structure. So one just basic direct action you can do is start using open source software, free Libre open source software. And why this is a direct action is twofold. One, it gets you off of these major corporations that put massive restrictions on what you can do with your technology. And two, and this for me is the more fundamental part, the free software community has created at least the platform for a fundamentally different mode of production. There is a different way of producing that emerges out of the free and open source community. And that mode of production, we need to port. We need to figure out ways to utilize that same model in other regions of our existence so we can actually transform the mode of production. One of the first things for us to do as individuals in that regard is to get rid of our proprietary software and become a part of a community that actually is doing something different. Now, there are lots of reasons why it happened in the digital world, I think, and part of that is because it's not material, and it allows people to, well, actually, more wealthy people have a little bit more free time to just screw around, and their screwing around actually ended up sort of creating something new, right? But it's also about their commitment to a kind of action that isn't bound fundamentally to capitalism, but it's about creative labor. And I think as we begin seeing creative labor, or we begin exercising our right, in some sense, to creative labor in other realms, we can actually modify the mode of production. And I mean, but right now we can actually live in one register of our lives outside of capitalism, even while we're inside capitalism. And I think for a direct action, getting off Google and using open source operating system, fundamentally easy to do, relatively easy to do,
Props.
but fundamentally transformative.
I have two things to say about this. First of all, access to technology is really important if we want to combat elitism, because if people don't have access to free software and free networks, then they're prohibited in terms of the ability to learn and access opportunity. And so it's really, really important that we as a society encourage both community television and access, as well as open source software and methods that we can free ourselves from the oppression. So it's not necessarily saying, gee, kind sir, can you allow us not to be oppressed? It's taking it. And this is a way that we can actually do that. And so when I said that about that IT is just a service organization, it's because all of my life, everywhere I've gone, IT is a service organization, a support organization that lies underneath and serves the other organizations that they're part of. But here we have an opportunity to, as part of a revolution, in a sense, to be revolutionary in our thought. And so looking at access as a currency and saying, let's have access be something that we use as the common good, that we protect that access, is what these guys make it possible to do, because they're showing that you can have live radio. They're showing, and by the way, I have some things to talk to you about. Nonprofits are allowed to use copyrighted material, so we'll talk about that later. But using that to not undermine the current system, but to grow and develop and nourish something that can support our future as a sustainable society.
Wow. I think one of the fundamental issues is access to all kinds of resources, whether it be basic resources and food and shelter and medicine, and certainly technology. Would greatly enhance people's ability to gain access to those resources. What can be said about what else can be said? We've gotten to the point.
Well, I just want to make one point, actually. I think sort of everything that we've said here is sort of about technology, and especially nature and farming. I think that's very important, just because you see that a system that undermines its two sources of wealth, which is people and the environment, labor and the environment. We really have to think seriously about how we're going to get beyond that. A system that produces the wealth, that enables everyone to live a fuller and freer life, yet makes them work more and more and be more exploited. So I think that's very important. And one other point I just wanted to bring up, sort of in terms of the bigger picture, because we're also thinking about on a huge societal level, what can we do? And viewers may ask, what is your difference, let's say, with the Democrats and the Republicans? Why won't you work with them? And just one example I think that's interesting in regard to the Tea Party as well is the banks. A lot of people are outraged about the bailouts. But yet no one seems to have said the solution of, why shouldn't we have nationalized the banks? Because a big problem is that there are these huge works that need to be done in the U.S. Affordable housing. There are 640,000 homeless people. Mass public transportation, environmentally friendly transportation. Right. All these, as Tara said, these investments that have to be not just GDP growth, but actually help build a new economy. And yet, how can we do that when all the money that's needed is sitting in banks' excess reserves? So, I like to think of sort of the Occupy can think of these new sort of proposals, because they always want proposals and demands. Well, here's one demand. Why bail out the banks? Because, if the banks hadn't been bailed out, we would have 30% unemployment now. And yet nationalize them in a legitimate way, in a real way, and use all that money they have to invest in all these projects we've been talking about.
Right.
And put them under public control, under public oversight, and really have a state sector that's accountable to the people, not to the private sector, and can help, foster all of these projects that we've all been talking about.
One question that I wanted to ask everybody before we go, we got 15 questions. How do we avoid being subverted?
Action, direct action. Don't just march. You gotta go out and march, but you gotta do other stuff too. We can't sit around and just be taken to the
Mic check!
mic check.
Mic check! Mic check!
Mic check. Thank you, Zoe, for giving us the.